my first experience with withdrawal, of not having this opiate substance in my body. And I felt so sick. It was like the worst flu that I had ever had. I was shaking. I couldn't sleep. A lot of nausea. I felt like I wanted to throw up, but I couldn't. And it was like immediate depression, anxiety, all those things that OxyContin took away. It gave them right back whenever I didn't have the OxyContin tenfold. And I realized that there was no way that I could play a show. There was no way that I could get on stage and sing. There's no way I could do anything if I didn't have this drug anymore. So I started reaching out to a few people, and somebody told me, hey, man, I got something that'll make you feel better, but it's not OxyContin. It's heroin. And I wrestled with that idea for an entire day while I'm sick, trembling with these flu-like symptoms, knowing that I'm supposed to go and play another show with my band. And finally I called them up and said, hey, man, I don't care what it is. I need to get better. Like, I'm just going to do it this one time to get through the show, and then I'm going to figure out like how to stop using these things. Of course, that was the beginning of another long road where now I'm fully using heroin every single day. And I realized that it was so cheap. You know, $10 worth of heroin could keep me well all day long, where I didn't have to even worry about it. So, I mean, a very small investment on my part, the way I looked at it, would keep me the same energetic Nick that was happy to play on stage and had lots of stamina and energy to perform and just go out and kick butt all day long, and people would love me because I was that happy-go-lucky guy again. I wasn't like depressed, and my eyes weren't watering, and I didn't look like I was dying of the flu, because that's what withdrawal looks like.
Yeah.
Nobody is fun whenever they're kicking opiates. I don't care what they tell you. So I go through that long span of almost an entire year, and I realize that I have a serious problem because now I'm a regular heroin user. And so I took a leap of faith, called my dad, my biological dad in Las Vegas, and I said, hey, man, I'm in a bad way. I need some help. Like, I'm using heroin every day. It didn't start like this, but this is where I'm at, and I can't stop. Like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know who to tell. I don't want to tell anybody in my band. I don't want to tell any of my friends. I can't reach out to any of the people that I went to church with. If I tell them I do heroin, they're all going to judge me. So I don't know what to do. And he just said, hey, man, get over here to the Greyhound bus station, and we'll get you a bus ticket out here to Las Vegas, and I know a place that you can go. I got on the bus and went to West Care in Las Vegas, Nevada, where they ran a detox facility, and I believe it was a 7-day detox. I went there, and they gave me phenobarbital and Ativan and another drug called clonidine for like nausea. And I stayed there for a total of 3 days until I had an allergic reaction to the clonidine and actually had a seizure in the middle of the detox unit. They had to call the paramedics and transport me to the emergency room because I was having a full-blown seizure and they couldn't get me to stop. They transported me there without any of my clothes. I was just wearing the psych ward socks with the little grippy rubber things on the bottom and a gown because they took all of your clothes away from you while you're in this detox. And at the emergency room, they just juiced me full of Benadryl and I was fine. And they said, you know, you have a serious problem. You understand that you are in detox for like heroin addiction. But at this point, my brain was just telling me, you need to get drugs, you need to get drugs, you need to get drugs. Because I was still full-blown in withdrawal. Like, none of the drugs they really gave me at this detox place did much. Phenobarbital doesn't take away the withdrawal symptoms at all, to be honest with you. And my brain it was my first real experience with, you have to go get heroin. You have to go get heroin. You're in Las Vegas. There's plenty of drugs around. And so I actually left the emergency room against medical advice with no shoes on in a hospital gown in downtown Las Vegas and started walking without any shoes on.
Holy crap, man.
And so, I mean, I remember thinking, like, what am I supposed to do right now? Like, I didn't want to call my family. I didn't want to call anybody. And so I just walked back to the same Greyhound bus station that I knew. That's the only place I knew of because I didn't know Las Vegas very well at all. And there was several other transients, homeless people there. And I just kind of slowly assimilated with them to find out what am I supposed to do now? I remember asking people, what am I supposed to do now? Because this was my first experience with homelessness. This was my first experience with on the street drug addiction. It wasn't white collar like Oxycontin anymore. It was you're homeless in Vegas and you're addicted to heroin now. That was what my 21st birthday looked like. All of this happened on my 21st birthday in Las Vegas. I went from carrying my Bible to school every day, I couldn't even tell you what heroin looked like, to homeless at 21 in Vegas, trying to find heroin at a Greyhound bus station. I slept at that bus station for 2 days with no shoes, no clothes but a hospital gown, and was able to scrounge up enough money and call people collect in Bakersfield to get them to pay for a bus ticket one way for me to come back to Bakersfield from Las Vegas, which is only $65, if you just do it one way.
Yeah.
But that took me 2 days to get people to believe whatever story I was sowing them about why I was stranded there and get back to Bakersfield. And that led to immediately, once my feet hit the ground here, just right back to the same drug addiction that I was in before. And that turned into a 7-year span of my life where I was just constantly in the same cycle of up and down, up and down. I would get high, use, and then try and go to a detox, maybe stay there for the entire time, maybe not, and then relapse all over again. I never had a consistent long-term stretch of clean time or sobriety. All of them always led me back to using because I never worked a program consistently. All in total, I went to 13 rehabs in my life. I guess that's my claim to fame. 13 different rehabs, graduating most of them, and the one that finally worked for me was the Salvation Army in Bakersfield. And I guess I can tell you about the point whenever I decided to go there, because I've talked about the past, but there was a turning point for me. So fast forward now to Nick is 26 years old, and he is living in an apartment in North Phoenix off of 4th Street and Bell. And I'm living with someone I would call, quote unquote, a roommate, but it is basically just my drug dealer. And the apartment is in my name, and my drug dealer's street name. Every drug dealer has a street name. My drug dealer's street name is Lucifer. Great drug dealer street name, if anyone ever existed. So
in Phoenix, it's hell. It's
yeah,
hot.
no, for sure. Phoenix is another animal. The underworld that exists in Phoenix is gigantic because it is supported by so much cartel activity, so much. It's like a distribution hub to the rest of the United States. But I found myself mixed up in this group of people who was actually distributing different substances through an online marketplace. That's the best I can describe it without pleading guilty to any pending court cases. So I'm in Phoenix, and I'm living in an apartment with drug dealer Lucifer. And I remember specifically, just like any other day, I had to have heroin in the morning. And at this point, I was using heroin intravenously. And after doing that for several years, you start to run out of veins in your body. You start to try and use veins that you've never thought of using, like shooting heroin in your hands and in your fingers. You start trying to shoot heroin in the back of your arms and in your neck if you can get one of your veins, or in your arterial vein inside of your leg, or the veins in your ankles. once you've burned through all of those veins and you've tied off every part of your body, and then you've started looking up like nursing articles online on where other veins are that people don't hit, you start running out of options and getting very desperate. Well, one morning specifically, I was trying to get well with my morning dose of heroin, and I could not find a vein. I would stick a needle into my skin and try and get it into a vein, and as soon as it would get into the vein and I would see the needle register with blood, the vein would collapse and it wouldn't actually push off anymore. So then I'd have to take the needle out. And what happens in this situation is you start filling a needle with blood, and you start getting too much blood in there, and you're starting to panic because now all the heroin is mixed with blood and you can't find a vein. So I remember one day that this happened. I couldn't find a vein. So I took the needle that was now full of blood and heroin, and I put it in the cabinet above my microwave. And I decided I was just going to smoke heroin that day to get well, because it had been hours and I looked like a murder victim trying to hit my arms in multiple locations. Fast forward to several weeks later, me and my heroin dealer, we ran out of heroin, and for some reason we couldn't get any that day. And I was panicking because I was going to be sick and in withdrawal. And then I remembered, hey, I have that rig full of blood and heroin from 3 weeks ago above the microwave. Let me go over there and get it. But it was all like coagulated and thick because the blood had been in there for weeks, along with heroin and whatever the heroin's cut with, and whatever old bottle of water I had sucked it up in. I mean, we're living in a trap house. It's not like we had some really extravagant, beautiful house. We were in Phoenix, in a low-income apartment complex. So you can imagine what our hygienic situation was.
Right.
Well, I show it to my heroin dealer, and I'm like, hey, man, I got some heroin still in this. And he's like, oh, dude, you're not going to be able to do that. It's all clotted up. Good luck. It's worthless. I said, oh, trust me. So we had other drugs at the time because, like I said, we dealt in a lot of different substances, but heroin was the one that I wanted. So I went into the cabinet and I got some Jack Daniel's whiskey, and I was able to unload all of the blood and heroin into a spoon and then add several drops of Jack Daniel's whiskey into it to get the blood to break back down. I figured the alcohol in there would at least separate it. And it started to work. It was still pretty thick, but it started to work. And Lucifer comes over and he tells me, dude, what are you doing? I said, oh, I'm going to get this thing to work. And his great idea was, well, hey, man, if you're going to shoot up whiskey, you should put some other stuff in there, because there's some things that are only soluble in alcohol. Let's just put everything we got in there. We got a bunch of different drugs in here. So he just kind of dips into the drug dealer backpack that every drug dealer has that's got like a little bit of everything. It's like your mom's spice cabinet, but a really messed up version of it. So we get like the remnants of a piece of meth, put that in there. We get the last bit of a bag of cocaine, put some of that in there. And then we both looked at each other because we knew we had some Xanax that we had just ordered online. Just put those in there too. We don't even know if they're soluble in alcohol or water or not, but like we might as well at this point. And like the coup de grace, the cherry on top, was one small square of acid. We were just going to put that on there as well because neither of us had shot up acid. Lucifer refused to do this shot, even though he was withdrawing from heroin, which I thought was an excellent show of self-control. And I was actually very happy about, because it meant there was more for me. So I took all of this concoction that we had put into a spoon mixed with Jack Daniels and pulled it back up into a syringe. And it was a gigantic, dark, soupy, bloody mess. And I was able to lay over my bed just to get a vein on my neck to pop out enough, like hanging upside down. And I had Lucifer actually hit the vein on my neck and push off that entire rig full of heroin, Jack Daniels, cocaine, meth, Xanax, and acid into my arterial vein. And I remember it burning like nobody's business, and my head starting to throb, and it felt like it was starting to swell up. Like my lips immediately went numb, and I started to get very cold, and I started to panic for a minute. But then I felt like the pins and needles of all of the heroin in the rig just wash over my brain, and instantly all of my withdrawals were starting to fade away, and I stopped panicking about all the other weird side effects